Welcome to Healthtech Hustle. We exist to share stories of the brave entrepreneurs helping to solve the most important problems in digital health today. We interview top leaders in health tech and bring them onto our show each week to listen and learn from their story. With your host, Rodney Hu, founder of 209 Digital.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Healthtech Hustle podcast. My name is Rodney Hu, and today I am joined by a very special guest, Miss Rachel Ford Hutman. She is the founder and CEO of Ford Hutman Media, and they provide media relations, thought leadership, and executive visibility to life science companies across the globe. Clients range from venture-backed startups to large-cap public companies, and was founded by our guest today, Miss Rachel Ford Hutman, a media relations standout who has worked on some of the world's most important health technologies of all time. Rachel started her career as a reporter and excels at working with the media to bring health stories to life while still making them accessible to stakeholders. So with that being said, I'm excited to have her on today and kind of learn more about her story and kind of what she's doing in healthcare. So with that being said, Rachel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rodney. It's really a pleasure to be here. And, I enjoy the podcast. So I'm happy to share my story and to chat with you today.
For sure. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you just give people a quick background of kind of who you are and kind of how you got into healthcare?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rachel Ford Hutman, founder, CEO of Ford Hutman Media. And I think you just gave a great overview there, so I won't repeat it. But, I started my career as a reporter, and I really enjoyed that. And during the financial crisis back in 2008, the newspaper I was working for, I actually laid off a lot of people. And so I needed to find another role. And I actually kind of just fell into public relations. I was always working with people in the PR profession as a reporter. And so I thought that would be a nice industry I could kind of do a little jump to. And the first agency I worked at specialized in healthcare and technology, which are two staples of the San Diego marketplace, which is where I live. And so I started working with just some amazing healthcare and technology companies. And I just loved it, Rodney. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I felt like we were actually, making a difference, in the world. And in my small way, I was contributing to that. And so I loved it. And then I kept working at PR firms from there and just slowly started working with larger and larger companies and doing even cooler things. And then my most recent role, I was actually leading communications at IBM Watson Health, which is IBM's AI division in healthcare. And that was a really exciting role. And I got to travel all around the world. But at some point, I really wanted to start my own business. I love media relations and I love helping companies tell their story. And so last March, I started Ford Hutman Media, and it's been amazing.
Nice. So you have this background as a reporter in PR and media relations. Mm-hmm. But what was that turning point for you? Because you've worked with other firms and whatnot, and you have all this experience. But can you take us to that one point that really pushed you over the edge where you're like, okay, I want to start my own company. I know what I'm doing, but I want to go out and do this for others.
Yeah, I'm smiling because everyone asks me that question, and it's just so interesting because I asked so many entrepreneurs that question too, before I did this. Okay. And I just was like, how did you know? How did you know when you're ready? Because it's like that $1 million question. All I can really say is there's not a moment, but you do have to kind of jump off the cliff, so to speak, and have the confidence to do it. And have faith and trust in yourself and your experience that you can do it. And, once I did this, it wasn't even a cliff to jump off of. I was like, oh my God, of course, you've got the network, you have the experience. I've worked with some amazing companies over the years. And so you keep all of those relationships. But I do tell people that you really should network and chat with people that have done this before. Whatever company you're looking to start, you absolutely should chat with people that have done it, stand on the shoulders of giants and really, take experience from others and be vulnerable, tell people what you don't know and what you might be scared about. And those conversations that I had with my other, industry colleagues that had done this, I learned so much, Rodney, and you have to be open to learn. And, they would tell me things that might be hard, or that might be challenging, or that they had gone through. And it's just, it's a really important step I would encourage any entrepreneur thinking about making the jump to take.
Awesome. I think that's an excellent piece of advice, inspirational. And so what I'm interested in is you started with your background in PR, like we established, and then you created your own company, and now you're helping other companies sort of share their message and get their message out to a wider audience. So can you kind of explain the importance of PR and media relations when it comes to healthcare?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, it's really important for any company to make sure that they have a very clear, consistent message that they're delivering to their stakeholders. And so with healthcare, it can become incredibly complicated because they might have a lot of different stakeholders. And so their message might need to be very diverse depending on which audience it is that they're trying to target. And so, it's really important to work with a public relations and communications firm that can help distill that message that you want to share externally, right? Because that's what's going to build your brand and your reputation, for years to come. Bill Gates has this great quote about if he was down to his last dollar, he would spend it on PR. And I love that because it's so true. You really need to make sure that your message is clear, to the public about what it is and what the value that you provide is. And especially being in healthcare and technology, this can get very complex very quickly. A lot of times I'm working with companies that are developing a technology in healthcare for the very first time. So sometimes there's not even a word to describe what it is that they're necessarily doing. And we might even have to kind of come up with a few words to be able to explain it. And then also what I work with a lot of my clients to do is that value proposition, how they're actually changing healthcare for maybe a hospital or for a doctor. Like, what's that value? And really trying to make sure that we're communicating that clearly. And, a lot of times working with reporters, well, we might have to educate them a bit about what it is that the company is doing. And then we need to make sure that they understand what that end result is going to be. Because that's really what the public cares about, right? Like you and I, we don't necessarily care when we go to the doctor what software it is that they're using, right? What app the doctor might somehow now be able to get information on. Like, we don't care. We just want to be able to go to the doctor and have the result quickly, right? Like we don't need to, like, all that technology stuff just kind of needs to get out of the way. Yeah. One of my former colleagues at IBM Watson Health, Ted Tanner, and he's the global CTO there and chief architect. And he used to always say that. He's like, technology just needs to get out of the way. Like, we just need to make it easier. And right now, unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of technologies make things more complicated in healthcare.
Yeah, it's crazy because like healthcare in itself is already like a complex industry. Then you add like healthcare technology and it gets even more complex. And so it's like, I noticed like when I talk to a lot of like founders and CEOs from healthcare companies, whether they're from the healthcare side or the technologist side, they speak on at a level 8, 9, or 10 on the knowledge scale, whereas the average consumer only understands like a 1 or 2. So they have like this large knowledge gap in which like people, that's where they lose people. You confuse people and you lose people. So it kind of goes into the next question that I had is kind of like, what are like the main struggles that you see healthcare companies have, whether it be like trying to explain too much and overcomplicating the process and stuff like that? I know you said to focus on the results, but what is like struggles that you see other healthcare companies have when they're trying to share their message?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just nailed it. I think that they probably overcomplicate it quite a bit, and they speak a lot of times in this corporate jargon that we don't really understand. I work with a lot of companies where I have to challenge them because they're so used to using their acronyms, industry acronyms, right? Like they're almost too close to it. And they don't recognize that when we go external, a lot of these, other stakeholders aren't familiar with all of this terminology, but they're so ingrained in it because they're using it every single day, they're living and breathing it. And so we do have to challenge them when we start talking to a more external audience to, make it more accessible, to a lay audience. And that's really, really hard for anyone with, a clinical background, especially. to do that. And so I do have to kind of challenge them. A lot of times we'll do contributed content where we'll put together, a piece about, some scientific literature or something. And I work with the researchers to put this content together. And then I have to kind of go and like take off all the flowery language and make it something that's actually accessible to the public. And 9 times out of 10, when I send it back to the clinician to do his final approval, he's like, oh my goodness, because now it's been, I don't want to say dumbed down. That sounds awful, but it's just been made more accessible. And I have to explain to them why I do that. And I think it takes a lot of education. And most of the time, once I sit down with a client and explain why we're doing this and why the media needs it in this more, bite-sized format, they understand. But it just takes a little bit of education. And a lot of the companies I work with, the communications function, there's a lot of education around it. And oftentimes people want to throw PR and communications into the marketing function, which it's not. And so, communicators and public relation professionals, we've got a tough job to do because we also have to be kind of explaining to our clients and our colleagues what it is that we're doing it while we're doing it.
Okay. So you mentioned something interesting there, like PR and marketing don't go together. Because me personally, I've always thought they went hand in hand. So can you kind of elaborate on that and kind of explain that a little bit more?
Oh, I'm happy to. Yes, I laugh because this comes up a lot as well. So marketing is a sales function, and public relations supports sales, but we're not a direct sales function. We're really, preserving brand reputation and visibility for a company. And so while that supports the sales function, it's not directly related to sales. And so that's why marketing functions are usually very large at a company, because the marketing function does support the sales of the company, right? And so that's very black and white for them. And public relations is a bit more of a gray area. And so, a lot of times companies don't have as big of a public relations function because that's something they're not really able to kind of like put their arms around. Like, how is it really, like, dollars and cents? How is it increasing our revenue? And it's like, it's increasing your brand and your brand's visibility and trust in your brand. Like, it's doing a lot of things, but it's not directly related to sales. And so that marketing, that's the easiest way I think I can explain it to you, is that it's just not a direct sales function. Mm-hmm. Some companies do put their PR function underneath marketing, kind of next to them, just because it's easier. Especially smaller companies might not be able to have their own communications function yet. And so I think maybe that's why some of the confusion occurs. And obviously there is some overlap in what we do. So I think that's also why people often get confused. But it's interesting to me because I've worked with some of the largest companies out there, Medtronic, IBM, Google, and a lot of the executives don't completely understand the difference. And so again, it's just like kind of always like reiterating what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks for the clarification.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's either like marketing is the broader, bigger umbrella term, and then PR, media relations, is just one part of that, or it can be two separate entities. Like those are typically the two options that kind of happen.
Yeah, I mean, yes. I mean, it depends on that organization and how that organization is structured. I would say, academically, communications is its own function in and of itself. And I have my master's in communications and media studies, and, marketing was never a part of any of the classes I took. So every business operates differently depending on the size and structure. But yes, communications should really be its own function, I would argue. And I personally, have not liked working for organizations that just lump communications underneath marketing, because if you have a marketing leader who doesn't understand communications overseeing that function, it can sometimes the lines get very blurred, hence why we're even having this conversation.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because like marketing and sales, they're all ROI focused, like how much am I spending, how much am I making? Whereas PR is like, we're getting more exposure, we're building that trust and credibility with your audience. And so I guess the next question I would have is, if a healthcare company is interested in PR and media relations, what sort of expectations should they have when like pursuing that?
So I think it's important to probably look at what their competitors are doing in this space, to probably get a good benchmark to understand, what else that they can expect. I mean, that's a really tricky question to answer because it's just so complex. But I think, probably speaking to PR firms to see kind of where they can start and what their budget is like, and to probably get a foothold in the industry would really be a good starting point for them. You don't want to just do PR for PR's sake. That's part of it. And media relations is a very big part of public relations. But, it's also messaging. It's also, making sure your executives are speaking at conferences and that you're submitting award opportunities. There's a lot of different things you can be doing to help raise your company's external profile and brand recognition. And media relations is definitely a component of that. And media relations is more driven by news and, product developments and things of that sort. So, sometimes companies reach out to me and they think they need PR, but they're just not there yet because maybe they're like very early stage. And I'm like, you don't have any news yet. You probably need more of the foundational things like your website, your messaging and content, things like that. And that could be done by a PR firm, but it could also be done by a content management firm or marketing firm. So I think probably having conversations would be good for them and just kind of start understanding where they're at in the process, and then hiring a really strong communications leader that has done this before and worked with a PR firm, that understands kind of the process. That would really help them as well.
Okay. So you said like some people approach you and like in their minds, they want PR because they want to get their message out, but they're not there yet. So like,
yes.
What is like the criteria that makes it like an ideal client or the ideal situation for someone to actually pursue PR?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what exactly their goals are, first off. But I usually want to kind of see what they have in regards to news. And because I specialize mostly in media relations and thought leadership. So if somebody does need a lot of that content development out of the gate, that might not be probably the ideal client for me. And I would probably refer them to someone else that specializes more in that. And like website development, because the last thing we want to be doing is going out there to do media relations. If then you go back to the website and their messaging's all over the place, right? And they're not speaking to one audience, they're speaking to like 5 different audiences, So we want to make sure that when we do the media relations and then start sending people back to the website or, wherever we're trying to, Twitter, what have you, we want to make sure that messaging is clear. So for me, I like to make sure those kind of foundational things are already set for clients. And then I like to look at what the upcoming news is going to be. Are we going to have some financing news? What are the products coming down the pike? Maybe some big new hires. Maybe they're hiring a new, chief commercial officer. Like, what are the things that we can start trying to put out there for them? And then we put together a communications plan. So that kind of maps out, through the year, what those news moments are going to be. That's for me where I really like to work with clients is like once we kind of know what those points are for them. And there's just some companies that just aren't there yet, or they just might not have news for a while. They're very early stage. They're not going to have a product hit the market for another year. So, I can probably start working with them maybe a few months before that first product launch, but you just don't want to start too soon.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting. I like how you kind of just walk through the process that someone goes through. Like if they do decide to like bring you on, like, okay, what is the process? Like, what do we have to focus on? Like the discovery process, the research process, and developing the game plan and the blueprint and implementing that. So that's very informative.
Yeah. It takes time too. It's not, I really, especially when I'm evaluating a client, it goes both ways, because I want to make sure I'm the best fit for them. What my services provide, I want to make sure, are going to be a match, because the last thing I want to do is set either of us up to not be satisfied with the relationship. So, I just always want to look really closely at them to make sure that it's, synergistic. And then once I confirm that, then it's off to the races. But I can usually tell within a couple phone calls if they have what is a good match for me and my services. And then if not, I can connect them with someone else, because there's a lot of different types of public relations firms and consultants and, marketing firms and all of that. So, it helps too when you start developing the relationships and talking to PR professionals, we can kind of then help them figure out what it is that they need and where they're at in the process.
Okay, gotcha. That makes sense. And so when you have these companies that are interested, or how are you even facilitating these conversations and like getting awareness around your brand, your specific company, and the value that you can bring to them? Like, is there anything that you found to be effective for you?
I am so incredibly lucky, Rodney. It has all been relationship based for me. All of my clients have come through relationships. They're all past colleagues that I've worked with in the industry. Some are from past friends that I've worked with, just friends of friends. It's just all been relationship driven. And it's been really, so far, knock on wood, just really easy. And I've been having to turn down business because I'm at my limit at this point. So I'm, now unfortunately having to push people off. But I've been very, very lucky. And I think that's why I would tell people, just making sure before you do anything like this, you have the right relationships. Because once you put your services out there, people find you. If you do good work, and especially if you've worked with someone in the past, they never forget that. And so that's been something for me that's just been really amazing to see, is that once you develop that relationship and you've gotten down in the weeds with somebody and you've accomplished a project together, and you have a good working relationship, because I'm sure, as you know too, once you have a good working relationship, like, you want to work with that person again because you understand one another. It's easy. You just kind of get each other. There's trust. And that to me is so incredibly valuable. So those are the people I want to work with, right? Like, I want to work with people I know and trust too, and that we get along great and we can have a laugh. When we used to be allowed to see people in person, we could have a laugh and a drink and it'd be great, right? So, so I haven't had any, again, knock on wood, but I've been very lucky.
Awesome. And then based off your experience, because like I checked out your website, you have like so many like past clients and people on like their logos on your site. So I was like, man, clearly you do good work and you've worked a lot with all these companies. And based off of your experience, is there like any like one piece of content or one strategy that you would highly recommend that's gotten really good results for clients, like consistently? Whether jump into a podcast or something, or, I don't know.
Yeah. What was the last thing you said? I'm sorry.
So like whether it be like just jumping on podcasts or doing speaking events or any sort of
I'm a fan of podcasts right now. They are very hot. I'm not going to lie. Agreed. But honestly, I would say right now, contributed content is something that I've had a lot of success with my clients. And the reason for that is that, we're seeing a lot of reporters, unfortunately, being laid off during COVID. And there's just not as many reporters right now to write the stories. And so companies are really having to write their own content in a way that they did not before. And so I've been working with almost all of my clients to develop that contributed content that ladders up to their, key objectives, and then place them in an earned outlet. So then I'll turn around and try to get that placed in, Fierce Healthcare, for example, or Med City News, what have you, Stat, and that's been great because it helps get the company's message out there. It usually has to not be as branded, but it helps get the company's, thought leadership out there in a really nice, tangible way. And I've had a lot of success with clients doing that right now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That's tight. I like it because like the value that your company has, like you already have a large network. You already have like the resources. So when people work with you, you kind of already know like, all right, this is what we're working on. These are the platforms that we can distribute to. And because you've already built those relationships, it's kind of like, it makes everything easier to kind of sell to them or to explain to them, really.
Yes. I would agree. And it's a really nice proven model. And I've done it with all of my clients, and I bake it into pretty much all of my scopes of work, that's something I want to do for them. And we've had a lot of success with it. And as long as they're saying something that's of interest to the industry, then we can usually get it placed in a really nice healthcare trade.
Awesome. So yeah, I think we covered a lot of like interesting topics here, and like really the importance of what you're doing in the healthcare industry and with other healthcare companies. But I like to end each episode on a little lighter exercise with something I call the rapid fire round. So I'll ask you a set of questions and you kind of just give me whatever answer you come up with. Okay.
Okay. I'm ready.
All right. Question number 1. What is your favorite book of all time?
Oh, Catcher in the Rye. Yeah. By Salinger. I love that book. I've reread it so many times over the years. Yeah. And it's neat too, because it changes as you get older. I loved it when I was younger, but I still love it now that I'm older. It's just a beautiful, beautiful book.
Yeah, I remember reading that in high school. Is the main character like Holden Caulfield or something?
Yes. Yeah.
I still remember it.
You must have liked it. That's good. It's a good one.
Number 2, who is the most influential person in your life or career?
I would probably say my dad. My dad always encouraged me. Yeah. He would always say, you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it. So, he always encouraged me at school and all of that. And, he had 3 daughters, so he was very pro-female. And he was a man before his time.
Awesome. Shout out to your dad. Number 3, what is one goal you want to accomplish this year or next year, 2021?
I want to get good at the short board. It's really been frustrating. I usually surf longer boards. So I've been really, really focusing on this tiny little board. And I just want to get decent at surfing it.
Dang, short. How long is your board right now? How long is your short
board? This tiny one, 5'6". It's like a little skateboard.
What the heck?
Yeah. Anyone who surfs will know my pain. When you go from a long board to a short board, it's quite challenging, but that's my goal for 2021.
Yeah, I don't think I ever surfed anything less than 6 foot.
I'm telling you the thing. Yeah.
I got to work on balance. My balance was never the best.
Yeah, part of the fun.
Last but not least, what is one piece of advice you would give to your 20-year-old self?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I would tell her to take a gap year already. Relax. You have the rest of your life to work. Go travel the world. Enjoy yourself, I think I was just so ready to get into the workforce and get out there, and I was so scared of like people getting ahead of me. I've always had this, I guess, entrepreneurial spirit. And I really wish I would have taken a year to just enjoy myself and backpack across the world.
Dang. So you've just been hustling ever since? The grind don't stop?
I think I've been doing the hustle for a while. So I think I would tell her it's okay to chillax a little bit.
Okay. Now you see why I brought you on the podcast, Healthtech Hustle. You're a perfect fit.
Yes, I am.
For sure. Well, that's all the questions I have. Rachel, just want to thank you again for jumping on, kind of sharing your story, sharing the value of what you and your company are doing in the healthcare industry and how you're helping other companies kind of get their message out, help with their branding, their messaging, and building that trust and credibility within the industry. I found it very valuable. I know my audience will find it valuable as well. So just want to say thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Rodney. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to hearing more episodes. I really enjoy the show.
Yeah, for sure. And last but not least, before you go, where could people learn more about what you do and connect with you?
For sure. People can connect with me on LinkedIn, Rachel Ford Hutman, and check out my website at fordhutmanmedia.com. And, if my services aren't a fit, happy to, direct them to another firm or consultant that might be a better fit for them.
Awesome. Thank you again. I'll be sure to include all those links in the show notes. That concludes today's episode. Catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Healthtech Hustle with Rodney Hu, founder of 209 Digital. Tune in next week for another interview with an expert leader in digital health.